situation. You're on the verge of winning your local HeroScape tournament, getting invited to nationals. You have Nilfheim up against Deathwalker 9000 and a Feral Troll. Nilfheim is engaged with Deathwalker 9000, and you got height advantage. So it means you have two options for how to attack. Option A, use Nilfheim's normal attack, which normally rolls for 6, but because of elevation rolls for 7, and try to take Deathwalker 9000 out with one strike. Option B, use Nilfheim's Ice Shard Breath special attack to attempt to take out Deathwalker 9000 and take out the Feral Troll. The Ice Shard Breath special attack rolls 4 dice per attack, but you can attack up to 3 times.
But you only get multiple attacks against different figures. So you have to take out
Deathwalker 9000
with your first shot of only 4 dice if you're going to take another shot at Feral Troll.
So which do you do? Well, there's a right answer to this question. Welcome to the Warfield. I'm Jackson Game Room. I've seen people run Monte Carlo simulations that determine what happens with HeroScape dice rolls. And the fact is, for most of these dice rolls, you don't need to run a simulation. You can just calculate the odds. So that's what we're going to do today. I don't just spend time playing games. I also spend a good deal of my day living in Microsoft Excel. Today, worlds are colliding! And you'll be there to witness the planetary catastrophe that is Warfield Analyzes Games with Excel. So tell your opponent that you just need about 10 minutes to go calculate the odds of what to do. Let's go fire up Excel and math the crap out of this puppy.
Welcome to the Warfield screen share. I'm gonna need to name everything. I'm gonna start by showing everyone what this is gonna look like when it's done. So this is an Excel file, and what you do is you type in, for a given attack, you type the number of attack dice you're dealing with. So in this case, we're looking at, for example, 7 from Nilfheim. Defense dice, so Deathwalker 9000 has 9 defense and 1 life. The calculator will tell you the expected damage, so that's on average how much damage you're gonna do, and the chance of knocking that character out. If I drop this down to 4 attack dice, see the expected damage goes down to 0.28 and the chances of knockout are 19.5%. That means that if you wanted to knock out Deathwalker, for sure, it's about 50-50 if you use the normal attack. But if you wanted to try and gamble and get an extra attack out there, you're giving up about 30% chance of a knockout by switching to the Ice Breath special attack. Ice Shard Breath? I don't remember. I'm a dad. And like a dad, I'm not gonna just give you this file. I'm gonna show you how to make it. Because you know, son, I won't always be there to do it for you. Yeah, I know. I said the same thing when I was your age. Reminds me of the time Billy Smits and I were going to collect for his paper route. We came up to Susie Johnson's house and we had to knock on Here's how you actually begin to build something like this. In theory, you could build this calculator as just one long equation. I don't enjoy doing that. It's, more of a unnecessary Excel flex in my opinion. I'm going to break this out into a few different nice little charts. This is a chart where we're going to show, or where the chances are getting different numbers of shields for rolling defense dice. We're going to start with defense dice, but we're going to do it in a way that we can flip quickly to do attack dice. If you're new to HeroScape, characters attack with a certain number of dice, and these dice have a 50% chance of getting a hit. So they have 3 skulls. So it's like you're rolling on 4 ups if you're using Warhammer terms. Then the defender rolls the number of defense dice that the character has. Even if the attacker only rolls 2 dice, the defender is going to roll 5 if that's what their defense value is. If the attacker rolls 9 dice, the defender rolls 5. Defense dice are successful on 2 out of 6, so effectively a 5 up because they have shields on 2 of the 6 die faces. So if you roll 1 die, 2/3 of the time you're going to get no shields, and 1/3 of the time you're going to get a shield. But rather than calculate that for every instance here and then just make that our calculator, we're going to put in a nice equation that's going to tell us the answer for us. So how do we even do that? Well, first I'm going to put the chances of a success in this cell up here. 1/3. Let me just type in 1/3.
0.33 repeating, of course.
If we want to go flip for between shields and skulls, we just got to change that to 0.5 for the chance of success instead of 1/3. Now, some of this you could probably do pretty quickly. So for example, if you want to roll 0 shields, you want to know what the odds are of that, you have to roll a failure on all of your dice. So you could do this first column pretty easily if you want. You'd be taking the chance of a miss. So that's 1 minus the chances of a success. So that's that 0.66 number here. We're going to get an absolute on that because that cell ain't moving. Raise that to the power of the number of dice. That just basically means if you roll 1 die, 2/3 chance of all your dice being failures. If you roll 2 dice, it's 2/3 times 2/3, so 2/3 to the second power. And the way you use Excel like this is I'm referring to the cell to the left here. I use these absolutes to keep the success rate of the dice fixed, and if I drag this down, You can see, yeah, 1.7% chance of getting no shields even with 10 defense dice. So if that's ever happened to you and it felt like 1 in 1,000, it was actually more like 1 in 50, maybe like 1 in 75 or so. That's easy enough to calculate. But if I want to calculate how to get 1 shield, it gets a little bit more difficult. If you had 10 dice, it's not as simple as just saying, what are the chances that 9 of my dice are failures and I have 1 shield? Because you see, there are actually 10 different ways you could roll 1 shield. And I'm going to show this in another sheet. Most probability problems come down to breaking it down to all the possible outcomes of a situation. So for dice rolls, you have to look at all the ways the dice could come up. To use an example, if you have 2 dice, there are 4 possible outcomes. You could roll 2 shields. You could roll a shield with die number 1. You could roll a shield with die number 2. And you could roll no shields. Some people might look at this and say that's only 3 outcomes because you have either 2 shields, 1 shield, or 0 shield. That's not the number of outcomes. That's the number of categories of outcomes. Imagine, for instance, that your dice were slightly different. One was, for example, smudged and one was not smudged. If you want to actually calculate the odds of things happening, you have to treat the smudged die being a shield as a different outcome than the regular die being a shield. What if you had 4 dice? There's one outcome that's possible that gives you 4 shields. That's obviously just all 4 shields. If you want to get 3 shields, so that means 3 shields and 1 failure, there are 4 different ways you could get 3 shields and 1 failure. Likewise, there are 4 different ways you could get 1 shield and 3 failures. If you want to calculate the odds of getting 3 shields, you need to calculate first the chances of shield, 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 miss, and then multiply those chances by the number of ways it can come up. So here you'd say, what are the odds of getting 3 shields and a miss? And then multiply that by 4 because there are 4 different ways to get 3 shields. It gets even more complicated though when you start looking at, well, what are the different ways you can get 2 shields? So I'll come down here. Let me zoom out a little bit because we're looking at more rows here. There are 6 different ways that you can get 2 shields when you're rolling 4 dice. You can be the first 2, you can be the first and third, etc. With 4, you can do it. You can say there are 6 different ways to get 2 shields. But how many different ways are there to get 2 shields when you have 10 dice? That's a little bit harder. I can't really do that one in my head. Or how many different ways can you get 4 shields when you're rolling 10 dice? That's even harder to calculate. There's a concept in combinatorics, which is one of the scarier words in math, called an n-choose-k function. And an n-choose-k function is basically saying how many combinations 4 choose 2 is the same as saying 4 dice choose different combinations of 2 shields. n-choose-k for 4 choose 2 is 6. There you go. You use the n-choose-k function to say how many different combinations are there that can come up with that same result. All right, so I've laid a bunch of math down here. So how do we bring it all together? What you have to do is calculate the odds of each outcome coming up. All the outcomes with the same number of shields will have the same odds. Outcome 2 has, jumping ahead here. Outcome 2 has the same odds as outcome 3 and the same odds as outcome 4. Why is that? Well, when you multiply the odds here, you can see you're just multiplying by 2/3 with a different die. Thankfully, this HeroScape's simple enough where you don't have, the 8-sided dice or anything silly that would make this different, or weighted dice. Although I've heard that some of the HeroScape dice aren't super fair. So you need to take the odds of getting 3. So that would be 1/3 to the third times 2/3. And then you got to multiply the number of combinations you have. For 3 shields, there are 4 combinations. We have the start of an equation here that we can actually put in our spreadsheet. Because you see this 1/3 to the 4th is the same as saying 1/3 to the 4th times 2/3, which is the miss, to the 0 power. For 3 shields, you're doing 1/3 to the 3rd times 2/3 to the 1st power. For 2 and 2, it's 1/3 to the 2nd power times 2/3 to the 2nd power. It's 1/3 to the power of the number of shields, or the successes, and then 2/3 the power of the number of misses. So that's pretty easy to put into the spreadsheet. The second piece that I refer to as the combinatoric piece, you have to take, let's actually zoom out a little bit here. If you want to know how many combinations you have, we know that there's 1 way to get 4, 4 ways to get 3. This is the n-choose-k function. So this is 4 choose 4, 4 choose 3, 4 choose 2 shields, 4 dice choose 1 shield, which is the same as saying take your dice and choose shields, which thankfully there's a function in Excel that does exactly that. It's the combin for combinations function. So you take the combin for the number of dice and the number of shields. So the equation we got to put in our chart is the chance of each outcome, which is over here, and then multiply it by your combination function to get the number of combinations for that particular dice output. So your function is going to look something like this. So if I want to actually build this into my calculator, I'm not going to use that simplified version here. I'm going to try not to screw this up as I'm doing this. My shield rate to the power of the number of successes I want, which is, for in this column, 0 shields, take the absolutes, times chances of a miss, which is 1 minus that success rate, to power of the number of misses, which is number of dice are rolling minus the number of shields. So that's going to give us the probability of each outcome that gives 0 shields for 1 dice. And then we multiply that by the number of combinations where we have this many dice. In this case, it's 1. And this many successes. If I copy this down, these numbers will look exactly the same as the ones we had before. But now if you drag these out, if I've done this right, now you actually get the numbers going out here. Now, if I don't like this error function, that's actually, that should just be 0% because that's all for the numbers of shields more than the number of dice you're rolling. So I'm going to wrap an if error function around here. And there you go. If you're rolling for shields, you have 1/3 chance of a shield. If you're rolling, for example, 7 dice, you have a 0.6% chance of getting exactly 6 shields. Practically 0% chance of getting 7 shields, but it's not actually 0. If you look at this percentage here, it's not 0. The cool thing is now that I put in this 0.3 here and I've only referred to this cell, I can change this to 0.5, and now this is the skulls numbers, which is, you can see, higher chances of getting the higher numbers here. I would just call this skulls. All right, so how do we make this into a working calculator where you can just punch in the number of shields or skulls and go from there? Well, I'm going to jump on over here to the built-out calculator. Here's my shields table. Okay, if you copy and paste this table over and then change it to this 0.5, now you get your skulls table. So you have the rate of chance of getting different numbers of shields and the chances of getting different numbers of skulls. So what I do is I make this little mini table here, take the number of attack dice and refer to that cell that you had up here, so cell B2. This will then, I have to use XLOOKUP to grab the dice. You look down until you see that number of dice, and then you're going to be looking down the same number here to get the number of skulls. And I'm just looking up in the column we're in. So I'm doing a lookup here, taking 4, looking it up in the dice column, which is what the red is here, and it's going to give me the result from the skulls column that we're in, which is the purple. If I do absolutes on the blue and the red, I can drag this function across so that when we're over here, it's grabbing the purple cells. You see it moved over to the same column. So this is the chances of getting 1. So what we have here is for 4 dice, it's just pulling the row out that associates with 4 dice. So it's this row right here. So I'm using XLOOKUP to do that. For the defense dice, I'm doing the same thing. I'm just looking up in the shields table. So if we have 4 attack dice, you can see the odds of different numbers, and then 9 defense dice, you can see the odds of all the different results. Now we just have to convert this into actual damage, and then we also have to separately convert it into knockout percentage. This is the odds table this is taking skulls versus shields. What this chart is showing is, say, what are the chances that the result is 0 skulls and 0 shields? There's a 0.2% chance that that's the exact outcome from the dice roll. There's a 0.7% chance the attacker rolls 1 and the defender rolls 0. Actually, interestingly, the most likely chance is the attacker rolls 2 and the defender rolls 3. And if you play HeroScape, that has happened quite a bit. That's a very common situation to be in. So there's the odds of all the different combinations. And I have a table here that is just the number of damage in each. So the skulls need to outnumber, I should probably put the names up here. So this is the damage table. If you have 1 skull and no shields, that's 1 damage. If you have equal or more shields, you have no damage. 10 skulls and no shields, that's 10 damage. This final number here, this is our damage number. Kind of slick here. You take the sum product function, which is just going to multiply all these cells together. So you take the sum product of this big range and this big range. So it takes this 0.2 and multiplies it by 0. It takes the 0.7, multiplies it by 1. So there's a 0.7% chance of getting 1 and 0, which is 1 damage. And then it adds it all together. If you want to make sure this is all right, all you have to check here is to make sure this whole table adds up to 100%. That means that you have everything that can happen and only everything that can happen. So we have 0.3 for the damage projection here, maybe 0.28. If you want to know the chances of a knockout, you need to know how much life your defender has. Part of the reason why I'm using Deathwalker 9000 is because he has only 1 life. And you create this table here where if the damage over here is greater than or equal to the life remaining up in this cell, then that's a 1. That's a 1 for a knockout. By doing the same sum product function, you're taking the chances of either getting a knockout or non-knockout. So by treating 1 as a knockout here, it gives you a percent chance of a 1, which is 19.5% if you're rolling 4 dice against 9 defense. And if you want to show that up here, then you just set these cells equal to the results down below. And you have your basic HeroScape odds calculator, your own personal Warfield HeroScape calculator. Play around as much as I want here. There's some unexpected results sometimes with dice. I don't know that a lot of people would have intuitively realized that 7 dice against 9 defense gives more than a double chance of knocking out the character. If I were dealing with Major Q9, I'm probably doing this math all the time. Let's say I had elevation on Deathwalker 9000 with my normal attack, that means I get 5 attack dice. 29% chance of knockout. If I do Queglix gun, 3 attack dice, that's only 11% chance of knockout. But I do get 3 attacks in. With Nilfheim, it's a critical decision because Nilfheim, you have to target 3 different characters. Major, you're almost always going to use the Queglix gun because you can repeatedly hit the same character. So your actual chances of knockout for Major are about the same, whether you use 5 attack dice against 1 defense of 9 or 3 different attacks. When it multiplies out, it's pretty close. By the way, this icon here, this is a hand. This is just waving goodbye. You know, we're like counting out 5 for a referee for knockout. That was the first episode of WAGE Warfield. Warfield Analyzes Games in Excel Warfield. If you want more content like this, let me know. This is up my alley in a different way. And if you'll excuse me, I have a tournament to go win. Just kidding. The restraining order placed on me by my local game store to not show up to any more tournaments after I came with 10 squads of Death Reavers, and the 2011 title doesn't expire until 2030. With 2031, y'all better watch out. If you enjoyed this video, remember to subscribe to Jackson Game Room's Warfield, and I'll see you in the next video.